Hey everyone, it's Alexander the Real Mr. Robinson, and this is my review for Chapter 1 of The Mandalorian, which is the brand new Star Wars series from Disney Plus, and is the very first live-action Star Wars TV show, unless you count the holiday special and the Ewok Adventures as live-action TV Star Wars. But let's not go down that route. But before I actually get into Chapter 1 of The Mandalorian, I want to give you my first impressions on Disney Plus itself, and it's a good platform. It's nothing that I think is groundbreaking at all, because it's pretty much Disney's answer to Netflix. They want to get into the streaming service contest, much like everyone else. And I think people have been anticipating this streaming service more than the others because Disney just owns a lot of stuff. So being able to access everything that they currently have right now and being able to rediscover a lot of stuff from my childhood is pretty cool. Although I will say that this service has the same problem that Netflix does, where they have so much stuff, it's ultimately kind of hard to find what you're looking for if you don't feel like clicking on search and just typing in what you're looking for. And there are also some issues I have with some of the content. For one, they have every single season of The Simpsons on the service and The Simpsons movie, which is awesome, but for some of the earlier seasons, they crop the episodes to where some of the screen gets cut off, and therefore you don't get to see any clever sight gags. Like, the biggest example everyone's sharing on Twitter is the sight gag in the Duff Brewery that's been cut out. So I'm not a big fan of that. And to segue into the main topic of this video, they once again changed the Han shot first scene, where it's pretty much almost identical to the Blu-ray scene in terms of Greedo and Han shooting at nearly the same time. But before shots are fired, they insert a close-up of Greedo saying something in Arabic. I don't remember the exact word, but it's just kind of jarring. And apparently this was another change done once again by George Lucas when he was remastering the films to 4K in preparation for the planned 3D theatrical releases before Disney ended up buying Lucasfilm. And knowing that George Lucas was responsible for that change, it made me go, yeah, there's a reason why I feel like Star Wars is in better hands now that he doesn't have control. Because he can't do crap like that anymore. One day, I'm hoping for HD remasters of the original unaltered versions, because this year we got the Japanese version of King Kong vs. Godzilla in the United States officially, so I believe anything can happen. But anyway, getting back into Star Wars, let's talk about The Mandalorian, which is the biggest, most hyped Disney Plus original series that's been promoted, I guess. And basically, it takes place after Return of the Jedi. The Empire has fallen, the New Republic is in power, but the story follows a bounty hunter called the Mandalorian. He's pretty much the equivalent of Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name in the Man with No Name trilogy. And this first episode is pretty much an introduction to how this series is going to play out. I'm not going to go into spoilers at all. I'll save that for when I review the actual season later on, because I'm not planning to do individual episode recaps. But anyway, it's a nice introduction to what this series could possibly be, because the way it looks, the way it plays out, and the way the Mandalorian character is portrayed, it is very much what I was hoping we would get from Star Wars once Disney took over. Like, I still love the new movies, I love The Force Awakens, like Rogue One a lot, love The Last Jedi, and I'm okay with Solo, but this is really what I was expecting with the franchise. Like with Rogue One and like with Solo, this series does a really good job of recapturing the look of the original trilogy to where everything looks run down, dirty, and used. And more than those movies, it really paints the galaxy as a ruthless environment. We obviously follow the story of a Mandalorian bounty hunter, and bounty hunting is definitely a very, as Werner Herzog puts it, complicated profession. And the very first scene in this bar in the middle of this snowy planet sets the tone for how raw this series can get. And it also does a lot of world building in this era that we haven't really fully explored within the Star Wars timeline. We find out that there's a bounty hunting guild. They're just trying to make a living, and it can be very cutthroat at times. We also get a little glimpse into the Mandalorian's past, and we realize that this character is not just a bounty hunter with Mandalorian armor, a la Boba Fett or Jango Fett, but he's an actual Mandalorian. We get a moment where he meets other Mandalorians, and we find out more about their lifestyle and their traditions. We got a lot of that introduced to us in the Clone Wars, but this is the first time we actually get to see it in a live-action format, and I'll say this about the Mandalorian character right now. He's played by Pedro Pascal, and with all due respect to Boba Fett, I like this character a lot more than Boba Fett because, for one thing, he's the main character. You have to follow him throughout this series, and we actually get a little more of a backstory that's shrouded in mystery, but you really are curious to see what this guy's past is like. And even though Pedro Pascal never removes the helmet, you could tell with the tone of his voice that he has a bit of a personality. There is some humor throughout this series, but it feels perfectly in line with Star Wars. Whereas Boba Fett, as cool as Boba Fett can be, he really did nothing in the original trilogy. He was just there to be cool. This series is taking a Mandalorian and doing a lot with him. And given that this is the first of 8 episodes in this season, we're going to see a lot more. The action scenes are pretty well done. Most of the action scenes in this first episode are a bunch of shootouts. I mean, there's one main shootout that the Mandalorian has with an IG unit who is voiced by Taika Waititi, and you can't miss the fact that it's Taika Waititi doing the voice. But anyway, it's a shootout that is very much in the style of a Western. Again, going back to the influences of the Man with No Name trilogy and the Mandalorian pretty much being Clint Eastwood's character, it's very well done, it's very action-packed, it's very well choreographed, and the music is just spot on as well. The score for this series is done by Ludwig Göransson, and he's the same guy that did the music for Community and Black Panther. And what I love about his score here is that he's not trying to replicate what John Williams has done. I mean, yes, John Williams' music makes the Star Wars series, but with this score here, it gives you that spaghetti western feel to it. There's a lot of sounds that you wouldn't typically hear from John Williams in the Star Wars series, but at the same time, it still feels like it belongs in Star Wars because, again, it captures that gritty Western feel that they're trying to get across. If I had any problems with the first episode, it kind of goes down to special effects and makeup effects. Now, first of all, let me say this. The visual effects for the starships, any of the vehicles, and the IG droid are flawless. Like, you can make very convincing special effects when it comes to vehicles or anything that's artificial. Some things that are supposed to be alive and natural, like the blurgs that they show here, don't really look convincing most of the time. If you don't know what the blurgs are, they're these dinosaur-like creatures that were introduced in the Clone Wars, or at least that's the first time I saw them. And between this and Battlefront 2, it's really cool to see all of these things that were introduced through the Clone Wars translated into a photorealistic setting. But there are a few shots with the blurgs where they're running that don't look convincing whatsoever. And I get that this is a TV show and the first episode of a series that's on a brand new streaming platform, but I know Disney's willing to spend a whole lot of money on their products, so it would be weird if they cheapened out on this series. But again, I'm going to cut them some slack because it is a TV show, so you know that as impressive as TV effects have gotten over the years, they still can't hold a candle to feature film effects. And also I noticed that there are a few makeup effects on some creatures that don't look convincing. There were a couple of Trandoshans that popped up that didn't look all that convincing, but then again, I'm probably just used to how Bossk looks because he's the most famous Trandoshan, so it could be just a different species of Trandoshans. Just like how in Star Trek we've seen several different forms of Klingons, so it could be that. If it is, I'll take back what I've said. And then the last thing I have to say that's not really a negative towards this episode, it's more towards my expectations. There was nothing about this episode that blew me away. With the exception of the episode's cliffhanger, there was nothing about the rest of the episode that made me go, wow, that was incredible. But me saying that doesn't mean I didn't like the episode. And I'm sure whatever big wow moments this season is going to have will pop up later on, and I'm very excited to see what happens from here on out. So in the end, I think The Mandalorian is a fantastic start to the first live-action Star Wars series. With this series being created by Jon Favreau and with him as the writer of this first episode, you could tell that he's a big fan of Star Wars. When he played that alien in Solo, he spewed a lot of random Star Wars gibber that you kind of don't know, but you just kind of accept that it's a large Star Wars universe that has yet to be discovered, and I feel like this is a right step in that direction. And this episode's also directed by Dave Filoni, who was responsible for creating the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Resistance. So he's definitely a Star Wars expert, but has mostly stayed within the realm of animation. It's great to see his first live-action debut, and man, is it a hell of an introduction. I want to state something again. I don't have a problem with what Disney's doing with the Star Wars movies as of now. I think they're great. I don't think Kathleen Kennedy is a bad choice to run Lucasfilm, but if she were to go and somebody were to take over, I don't think you could pick anyone else but Dave Filoni. Because clearly this man, whether you like some of his stuff or not, like personally, I'm not a huge fan of Rebels, but he really does know his Star Wars stuff, and he's not afraid to delve into a much larger lore. And again, as a first episode for this series, I can't wait to see what happens next. Again, it didn't blow my mind, but it definitely is a step in the right direction for what I want the franchise to do. And there you go, that's my review for the first chapter of The Mandalorian. I'll be back to review the entire season once it's all done and just see how I feel about it then. But first, I want to know what you guys think about this first episode of The Mandalorian. If you've seen it, what did you think? Are you excited for the rest of the series? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.